Hello, hey, it's Brendan from WPSpeedFix. I have a video here on WooCommerce speed optimization, something we probably should have done a while ago. You know yourself, if you have a WooCommerce site and it's slow, it's going to cause problems with conversion rate, it's going to cause problems with SEO, it's going to cause problems with paid traffic. So speed is really important, extra important on a WooCommerce site, and there's a lot of different places WooCommerce can be slow. So let's get into it. The first place to start is looking at what your goal is. What are you trying to do? What area are you trying to fix? So WooCommerce can be slow in a lot of different ways. So backend, front end, or passing core vitals, the logged in user speed. So it might be a case where everything's fast, but as soon as the user logs into the front end, things are slow. It could be the add to cart is slow, or the cart or the checkout is slow. Managing orders can be slow, or managing products, and then doing big exports of data can be slow. Or even just timeout. But I would say as a starting point, core vitals should be where you look at. And the reason for that is that there are so many tools available to make the front of the website fast that you should be passing core vitals. So if you're not passing core vitals, start there. And those tools will typically make all the other things faster as well. So it'll make the backend speed faster, the cart and checkout faster, and everything else. So start there, and core vitals. So if you're not aware, is the real world speed of the website. So every time a user visits your website, Google grabs the speed out of a Chrome. Well, if they're on a Chrome-based browser, Google grabs the speed out of their Chrome browser and collates it. So that data is the core vitals data. So that's the real user speed on the website. Not page speed score. It's not about getting 100 score on page speed insights. It's about passing those core vitals metrics. So we have a report on our website that will actually show you the last 12 weeks of site speed, how your site's been performing. So if you go to this link, you'll get this page here. We actually have free email reports as well. So if you want to keep track of it over time, so basically just enter a website URL. So if we do, here is a membership site that we use in a lot of our videos that we know is slow. So you get a report like this and it will give you the metrics. So these are the three core vitals metrics: LCP, INP, CLS. LCP needs to be under 2.5 seconds for 75% or more of your visitors. So you can see this site is a little bit slow at 3.3. So that should be 2.5. And you can see that there's a graph here with the breakdown. So you can see here 65% of users are getting a good LCP time. So it's fast for 65% of people, which is pretty good. And then we have, 19% poor, which is not great. And then 16% needs improvement. If you'd run this report, so completely free, run it as many times as you want. And you'll see here, if you scroll down, you'll get a breakdown of this over the last 12 weeks. And you can see here the site was actually slower 2 months ago. That time to first byte was actually very poor. If you see the graph and it's kind of 50-50 red and green, kind of like this a little bit, usually that means there's some sort of technical issue or some sort of big issue under the bonnet. This is a membership site, and this is why this is poor. It has bad membership site software. That's what this is. But in your case, if you're seeing all red and a little bit of yellow, it usually indicates that there's a technical issue that needs to be fixed. It's not just speed optimization that's the problem. There's more of a configuration issue or a hosting issue. But LCP needs to be 2.5 or under. INP needs to be under 200 milliseconds. So INP is a measure of how fast the website responds to inputs. So this is fine at 100 milliseconds. CLS is how much the website moves around when it's loading. That's how stable it is. And CLS is best explained by this experience where if you go to a website and it's loading and you go to click on something and it finishes loading and now you click in the wrong spot, that's layout shift. So we don't want that. And it needs to be under 0.1. And layout shift is not a speed. It is a computed metric of how that stuff is moving around. So those are the three core vitals metrics. And then these other two metrics are important too, because they are speed metrics. So largest contentful paint is when the site has finished loading. So that's when the visitor perceives it as having loaded. First contentful paint is the start of the load. So when it's when the visitor perceives the site as having started to load. So that needs to be 1.8 seconds. So this one's actually quite poor at 2.9 seconds. And the reason for this is the time to first byte is poor. So time to first byte is how quickly the server is sending stuff to the visitor when their browser requests it, and that needs to be under 800 milliseconds. That's the target there. For a membership site, it's going to be a bit high, but if this really should be aiming for around 500 milliseconds for this to make everything fast. And you'll see if we drop that down to 500 milliseconds, so if we took a second off that, then these other metrics would likely come down by around, this one would definitely come down by a second, this one would probably come down close to a second, and they'd come into the passing zone. So if we were working on this website, we would be looking at how we can improve the time to first byte. So this is really the problem with this website. It's just slow to respond, or the hosting on the site or server is slow to respond to user requests. So start there. That's what you need to be in the green zone for first, and then look at these other issues here. With the big exports of data, if you have a large site, it's probably smarter, long-term, or wiser to hook up the site up to either Zapier or N8N, and instead of doing big exports of data, use the API to send data to these tools, and do it if you're exporting new customers, send them as they come in as opposed to exporting them at once, but basically connect the site to something else and stream that data instead of exporting it in bulk like that. And that'll kind of solve that problem. If you're doing a big export of thousands of customers or thousands of orders, that is going to be slow. There's no way around that because it's a big database query. But some of these things here will speed that up. Okay, so let's get into action items. Okay, so for WooCommerce, you need to be on good hosting. We've said this in so many videos that the cost of a good host versus a crappy host is like the cost of a cup of coffee for a crappy host compared to a nice lunch. Like if you're spending less than $10 a month on your hosting, it's probably not going to be good enough for running a WooCommerce site. It's just commercial reality. Versus if you're spending $50 to $100 a month as kind of a starting point, that should be decent hosting. So there's some two options there. WP Alpha is our managed hosting platform, or Cloudways, Seaways.net is another good option there. Good hosting should support the HTTP 3 protocol. That is a must. That's the protocol that web browsers use to connect to the hosting. If it doesn't support that hosting, it's just going to be, if that protocol, it's just going to be slow. We still see hosting that still only supports HTTP 1.1. The difference in speed between version 1.1 and version 2 is 50 to 100%. And then the speed difference from version 2 to 3 is 10 to 20% more. So it's a no-brainer. It's a free optimization. If your hosting doesn't support it, it sucks, basically. Hosting needs to be reliable, of course, and get uptime monitoring in place. So get uptime monitoring. I'll just write you a note there. Use simple uptime.co. That's our uptime monitoring solution. Your hosting should send an email through a proper SMTP provider like SendGrid. That's to make sure emails get delivered. So order emails are super important. So you don't want the hosting sending the email directly because that will have deliverability issues. So that's an important point. If you are on a VPS like Cloudways, or if you're running your own, use fast DNS service. So let me just make a note here. Use 8.8.8.8 and 1.1. That's Google, and that's Cloudflare. So quite often you'll see VPS is using the DNS providers from the provider, or DNS hosting from the provider that they're on, and that DNS hosting is usually quite slow. So if you use these two guys here, these are fast DNS hosting, and this is important when the site is connecting out to things like payment providers and shipping providers, because if that DNS is slow, then things like cart and checkout are going to be slow. So that's important. Uptime monitoring we covered, and then using the highest version of PHP your site supports. And I'm going to add another one, Redis for object caching. Object caching is database caching. Basically, it's not exactly, but it's basically. So that's kind of your checkbox for hosting. So your hosting really should do those things if you have a WooCommerce site. I think that's pretty straightforward. I don't think we need to harp on about that too much. We do still see customers on a Bluehost or a HostGator or a GoDaddy. Those guys are like a low-cost airline. They are cheap, but they will gouge you for all the add-ons. And they're cheap because they're kind of shitty. What do you expect when you're spending $5 a month? You're not going to get a good quality product, and you're certainly not going to get good support. So just be realistic about what you're spending versus what your expectation is. If you want it to be fast and rock solid, spend a few bucks more and you'll get the right solution. Okay, let's talk about caching. You absolutely need caching in place. You need, in WooCommerce land, you need a few different caches. So you need page cache. So what a page cache does, basically, when a visitor comes to the site or when a page is built, there's a lot of database lookups and PHP processing that needs to happen to build that page. What page caching does, it does that in advance and saves the page so it's ready to go when the visitor requests it. So you need that caching in place. Your hosting might do that if you're on something like a WP engine, but we would recommend using a plugin anyway. And one of these two plugins here, wprocketplugin.com or flyingpress.net. Those are pretty much the two leading plugins in the market. And they do a whole bunch of stuff to make that page cache work better. So that's why it's worth using a plugin, even if your hosting has caching. Caching for logged in users. So you want to turn this on in both plugins. That has that option. You want to cache logged in user sessions as well. So by default, a logged in session is usually not cached, but in WooCommerce, we want that because we have customers logging in to their My Account section or logging in to, make a cart or orders or whatever. So if you don't cache their sessions, those sessions are going to be slow. They will still be slower than a regular session because the pages aren't being built in advance. We do have some ways around that I'll talk about in a few minutes. But you need that enabled in the first instance. So make sure you have caching for logged in users enabled. It's easy with both those plugins. Redis caching. So you need Redis to support an object caching plugin. So object caching is a type of database caching. So the object cache sits in front of the database. So when a request comes through, it talks to the object cache first. And if it's in there, it loads from the RAM or memory rather than having to ask the database. So it reduces load again. And then the third type of caching is edge caching with a content delivery network. So what that means is you have a content delivery network, so that's a group of servers or a network of servers around the world that serve some or all of the website. So if my hosting is in the US and I have someone from Australia visiting the site, then most of that page will actually load from a server from Australia. So that reduces the impact of geography, and it also moves the workload off the hosting onto the CDN server. What edge caching does, it just caches more of the stuff. It's basically page caching on the CDN. So with that enabled, if I'm in Australia in that scenario, the entire page just comes off a local server in Australia. So we've almost completely removed the impact of geography. And in some cases, we don't need to go back to the server in the US at all for some of the page loads. So that's a huge deal. So let's talk about Cloudflare APO service. $5 a month for that. So that's dirt cheap. And that will substantially improve or increase the hosting's capacity to deal with a lot of users. So because Cloudflare is just doing so much of the work. FlyingPress, like we talked about, FlyingPress.net has a version of this where you can use edge caching without Cloudflare APO. But it's not super reliable. There are some edge cases where it breaks stuff, but if you're on a budget, using the FlyingPress plugin will give you something similar to that as well. So that's caching. So you need caching. Without it, things are going to go slow. Okay, so let's talk about CDN, Content Delivery Network. We kind of covered that off just now. So we recommend Cloudflare. It's the biggest CDN in the world. And it just works. It also does a bunch of other stuff like firewall and security. Never use two CDNs together. So you'll see both in FlyingPress and WP Rocket, they're selling their own CDN service. Automatic or WordPress also have their Jetpack plugin that is also doing that. So if you add two CDNs on top of each other, things will actually go slower because the traffic has to go from one CDN to the next one to the hosting. So you're just adding more steps into the traffic. So don't do that. We see a lot of sites come to us They have Cloudflare, and then they've bought the WP Rocket CDN, which is a bad idea. So it makes everything slower. So don't do that. Don't use two CDNs together. It will make things slower. Let's just make a note there. Two CDNs makes things slower. And I'll add these notes into the video description. So don't do that. We'd say use Cloudflare, and the paid plan, I think it's $25 a month. Includes firewall and image optimization. So if you have a bigger site, that paid plan has a real firewall that will filter a lot of garbage and attacks before it hits the hosting, and it has image optimization as well. I'll talk about this first. In Cloudflare, we also add some custom Cloudflare rules, and we have a post on our website about that. And one of the things we do is we filter brute force attacks. So we have this rule set here to filter brute force attacks on the back end of the website. A typical WordPress site gets anywhere from 1,000 to 10,000 brute force attacks a day. So with that Cloudflare rule, we can filter a lot of that crap and just remove that workload from the hosting, and also makes things more secure. We also do this thing here where we filter traffic outside your target country. So if you're only targeting the US or North America, for example, you can filter traffic or run traffic outside. In this case, I'd US and Canada. Run that traffic through a Cloudflare capture type setup. You would have seen this around the web where you go to a website that says checking your security. That's you being checked to see if you're a bot. So filtering that traffic outside your target country doesn't block legitimate users that might be outside. Some proportion of real users might be outside your home country. They might be traveling, or they might have some corporate VPN. But it will dramatically reduce the workload on the hosting. It'll cut out a lot of crawlers and scrapers and garbage traffic hitting the hosting. And it'll also make the hosting or the site more secure. So that's an easy one, and that's free. Even on the Cloudflare free plans, you can use that. We would also say use WordFence plugin, and the free plan is fine for that. So usually we would say use 3 layers of firewall. So we'd say use hosting firewall. Most hosting has some sort of firewall built in. Then use WordFence on the website itself. So there are some website level attacks that Cloudflare won't pick up. And then use those custom Cloudflare rules. So all that kind of section there with security is filtering traffic, making the site more secure. But a lot of that traffic is probing for holes, and it's just jacking up the load on the hosting, making things slow. And it will come in spurts. It's not consistent, even traffic. It'll hit the site and send 100 requests in a minute or something, and the site will be slow for that minute or that period of time. So the idea of that is just reducing that garbage traffic and making the site more secure. This one here, optimize robots.txt file. This is kind of similar. Google and other crawlers do try and crawl a lot of stuff. Depending on your WooCommerce theme, they'll try and crawl things like the My Account section and the add to cart links, and a lot of that stuff can make the site super slow. We very often see things like Google crawlers coming along and hitting the add to cart or add to wish list links multiple times a second. So they're sending hundreds of requests every minute to the hosting. An easy way to do that is just to update the robots.txt file to filter that traffic. So genuine bots will look at this file with genuine crawlers, and they will honor what you're telling them to do. So here is a sample file that you can just copy and paste. So we have it stopping crawling of login pages, stopping search pages being crawled, add to cart and wish list, currency and order by filters. Crawlers don't need to crawl those. And there's a few other things there. And we also have aggressive SEO bots that we're blocking there too. As those SEO bots can come along and crawl a whole bunch of stuff and knock the hosting over. So that's an easy way. That's a cheap way to filter garbage traffic or legitimate traffic or legitimate crawlers. This is a big one. So anything in the back end, this one is important. So let's talk about a few of these. We do have this article, Speed Up Database Queries, on our website that talks about 2 of these, or one of these, sorry, the InnoDB one. So let's talk about that because that's super simple. Let's talk about InnoDB. Let's find it here. So there we go. So the WordPress database can use 2 different formats. One is MyISAM, that's the older format, and the other one is InnoDB. So what happens with the older format, now if you have an older WooCommerce site that's 5 or 10 years old, you're much more likely to be running this table format. So when the database or when the website tries to write to the database, it locks the database table. So just think about the database table as a spreadsheet. So there's maybe, if you're a WooCommerce site, you might have 30 to 50 database tables, and each one of those would be like a spreadsheet. So when someone's adding to the cart, for example, or checking out, the site is writing to the database, and that table will be locked. Nothing else can be written to it in that period of time. That means that if you're getting a lot of add to carts or a lot of things happening on the site, those requests have to queue up, and it's causing a delay. So the users will experience that as a delay in their browser. If you're doing a lot of stuff with editing orders in the back end, you get the same experience because your browser is waiting for those database writes because that table is locked. With the InnoDB format, only the row in that table or sheet, if you think about spreadsheet again, is locked. So I can be writing to that. I can have multiple writes to that database table happening at once without that queuing effect. So if I have lots of add to carts happening, they're not queuing up. They can all happen at the same time. So it's really important we're using this newer format. So this plugin here, ServeBolt Optimizer, it is from a hosting company called ServeBolt, will do that conversion for you, and it will happen very quickly. So back up your database before you do it. So it'll do that conversion, add some indexes for the tables, but it will dramatically speed up database operations. So that one's a no-brainer. So that's InnoDB storage engines or database format. This one, high performance auto storage. This is a new database format or a new database format for WooCommerce. WooCommerce was originally hacked into WordPress, so it just used orders were just like pages in the database, which isn't a great way if you have a lot of orders or a lot of products or whatever. So what high performance auto storage does is set up a new set of tables for the WooCommerce specific stuff. So customers, products, orders, I think there's a couple other ones. Anyway, that will dramatically speed up things like managing orders, products, adding to cart, things like that. And you can do this in, actually this one's not done. You can do this in the WooCommerce settings. So if you go WooCommerce settings, and then I think you need to be on advanced tab, and then features, you'll see there's high performance auto storage here. And it will tell you if there are plugins that are not compatible. So in this case, there is actually an incompatible plugin. So this plugin needs to be dealt with, updated or removed. I don't think this site is using this plugin. But anyway, once that's fixed, you can turn this on, and then it will convert the database to this newer format. So what it needs to do, it needs to actually clone the orders and all the database information into the new table structure, which if you have 50,000 orders, that will take some time, a couple of days, and then it'll be ready to switch over fully. So that will make everything much faster. So that will make anything WooCommerce related much, much faster. There are also some, so that's high performance auto storage. There's also, in the more recent versions of WooCommerce over the last 6 or 12 months, since high performance auto storage came out, there are some new optimizations in here that aren't turned on by default. So let's talk about a few of these. Rate limiting the cart and checkout. So this is an important one to stop spam orders, and also can reduce load on the website if something is hammering it. So you can turn that one on, generally speaking, pretty safely. So just be mindful when you're playing stuff in here. This is the advanced section. High performance auto storage caching, turn this on. Some of these are going to change the way the website is working. So just be mindful if something weird happens with, if you, for example, searched for orders in a particular way before and that stopped working, it might be something to do with some of these settings because it changes the way the database works. And again, you'll see high performance auto storage, full text search indexes. So that'll make things faster when you're searching for stuff or you're doing things that are database heavy related to orders. You can see here, clear empty sessions. So that just removes junk from the database. API caching, so a lot of things talk to the WordPress API. If you have a shipping plugin that's, you're taking orders and you're sending shipping data somewhere else, the API is talking to that tool, so that will speed that up. And then this one here, caching the product objects. Again, this, some of these are risky, especially if you're using variations or weird things on orders. So just keep in mind, if you turn them on and something goes astray, turn them off. This API caching needs a couple of other settings. Let's just see if they show up in here. Here you go. So then you need an object cache for some of these. You'll see it requires an external object cache. But you can cache these API responses, which you probably should do if you have something talking to the API, because that will make those API requests faster. Even if you're using AI, you saw there was a WooCommerce MCP on that last page. If you're using AI especially, you probably want to turn that on to make things faster. You'll see, if I just go back one page, this WooCommerce MCP, this allows your API or your AI to connect to it more easily. So, yeah. So that's that. Those are the WooCommerce inbuilt optimizations. Let's talk about this optimizing JavaScript and third-party code. Google Tag Manager. Move code to Google Tag Manager. Use window loaded trigger where possible. That's probably one of the biggest JavaScript optimizations, especially for live chat code. So moving the code to Google Tag Manager, and that window loader trigger will change the code firing order so it fires a little bit later and makes the page load faster. And then use JavaScript defer in your caching plugin. I would say do not use delay JavaScript. This is going to break your tracking and things like that if you do. So I'd avoid delaying the JavaScript. So one way to you'll see these companies guaranteeing you 100 score on page speed insights, and one way they do that is to delay or not fire the JavaScript on the front of the website until the user interacts with the site. So that looks great in a page speed test because the site isn't fully loading. The problem with that is it breaks the website. So it can break the tracking, it can break the way it works, it can cause all sorts of errors under the bonnet. So especially on a WooCommerce site, don't do that. I won't go into that too much further because that's kind of technical. So that could be its own video in itself. Okay, next one. Use as few plugins as possible. This is pretty straightforward. Do a plugin audit. Get rid of any of the junk that shouldn't be there. I don't think we need to talk about that anymore. I think that's self-explanatory. Compressing images. I mean, of course, this is straightforward. Use EWWW Optimizer. That's a simple one. That's a plugin we use. Most of the optimization plugins are all the same. They compress images. They, make them smaller. We like this one because it can do the compression on the hosting without using an API or a paid service, so it works for free. This one we see all the time, surprisingly. If you're hosting videos, host them on your YouTube where possible. We see a lot of sites using Vimeo or just hosting the videos directly. That's fine, it's not a problem, but from an SEO perspective, especially in the AI world, having the videos on YouTube with a keyword-friendly title that doesn't have a date in it, make sure it has no dates in it so the video doesn't look old in 2 years. But that can help your SEO quite a bit, especially because you've got AI snippets in Google now. If you have a YouTube video that's linked to the page, it'll help the page rank higher, but the video itself has SEO juice. And you'll see on most search results on Google now, you've got ads, you've got an AI snippet, and then you've got a video snippet, and then the regular SEO results below that. So the YouTube ones can put you higher up on the page. So this is kind of more, it's somewhat of a performance thing, but it's more of an SEO thing and a marketing thing. So host the videos on YouTube where possible and make the title of the video keyword or search friendly. Don't spam it. Don't stuff it full of keywords. But, if you have a product video, make the title of that YouTube video the product name, demonstration or whatever, model XYZ, product demo or whatever it is. But that will likely get some SEO traffic versus hosting the video directly or using something like Vimeo. Speculative loading and just-in-time preloading. These are features of those two plugins that I talked about before, WP Rocket and FlyingPress. Or just-in-time preloading is probably the best way to demonstrate what this is. If we go instant.page. Oh, yes, we want to leave that. So what just-in-time preloading is, there is a gap between when you hover over a link and when you click on it. So you can see here, there's a button. So if I hover over that, and then it's 1.4 seconds between my hover and my click. So in that gap, you can actually load the page, or the browser can load the page. So what just-in-time preloading does is it enables this functionality. So if I'm hovering over these links, they start loading in the background before I click. And then when I do go and click, the page is already in my browser ready to go. So it's just called preload usually. So just in time preload. This is called preload. So that's what just-in-time preloading is. Speculative loading or speculation rules is something else where it does something similar, but instead of just loading the HTML when I hover over something, it actually loads the entire page. So it loads the images and the JavaScript and CSS. So that's the kind of next level of that. I would say install speculative loading plugin. Loading plugin. Enable prefetch. Not pre-render. Don't do this. I'll talk about this in a sec. Not pre-render. Oh, I can't type. And eager mode. Okay, so speculative loading has two modes. It can do prefetch, where it downloads the page in advance, and it can do pre-render, which actually loads the full page and executes all the JavaScript. Prefetch is good because everything will be cached in our browser. If we do pre-render, it will mess up the tracking. So it actually goes and loads the pages and loads the analytics code. So it'll look like that visitor is visiting a bunch of stuff on the site, and it's not, or they're not. So don't use pre-render. It will break tracking on a WooCommerce site. There are scenarios where it's useful, but not in this. And then enable eager mode. So that's the most aggressive mode. So it'll preload the most stuff. With eager mode. So that is a free plugin from Automatic or WordPress, and it will allow you to configure those settings those are more aggressive settings. So that's kind of like the broad overview. What doesn't work? You'll see stuff around the web. Minification doesn't do anything. Don't waste your time on this. Minifying CSS, minifying JavaScript, combining CSS and JavaScript. This doesn't do anything. It actually makes things slower. There is a tiny amount of bandwidth saved by minifying things, but usually plugins, when they minify stuff, they change the file name. They'll change the CSS file name or JavaScript file name, which then breaks the caching. So if I've gone to the website last week and I come back this week, the CSS files have a new name and my browser has to download them again. Whereas if they were just left alone, my browser already has a copy and doesn't have to download them. So it makes caching worse. Doesn't do anything for speed. Combining files like this doesn't do anything on the modern web. If anything, makes things slower. So minifying, combining anything, ignore it. It's a waste of time. Servers have Brotli and gzip compression. Stuff is compressed. Cart fragments, same thing. This comes from an old era of speed optimization where a cart fragment is basically an AJAX call to the website. So your browser is doing a form of an API query to the website to get the data about what you have saved in your cart, so it can update the little cart icon in the header. That's what a cart fragment is. Disabling that doesn't speed anything up if we're using real measures of speed, core vitals. So core vitals is the measure of the real load time of the website in the real world, and cart fragments don't impact that. They do add a little bit extra load, but that's fine. That's not a big deal. Cart fragments will make the site look slower in an older speed test tool like Pingdom, but in reality, it doesn't impact the real speed. So just ignore that. And messing around with cart fragments can break the cart or break the header. So don't touch that. We don't do anything with that. We haven't in about 5 years. So don't waste your time with cart fragments. Other important things to do, and also I'd say there's probably another one here, Cloudflare. You'll see custom Cloudflare caching rules. You'll see people around the web saying to add all these rules to Cloudflare and caching. Don't do this. So use Cloudflare APO instead. A lot of people breaking Cloudflare by adding all these custom rules for WooCommerce. You don't need any custom rules. Just use the Cloudflare APO service. So that's stuff that doesn't work. Other things you should probably do that are important or adjacent to speed, using the e-commerce focused theme. E-commerce themes are usually and a mature theme and a mature theme. E-commerce themes are usually built for speed, and they have a whole lot of e-commerce features like upsells and things that are just useful for selling more stuff as opposed to a vanilla non-e-commerce focused theme. So as long as you're using e-commerce focused theme, and it's mature, you'll usually be fine. Don't switch themes for speed. Most of the time, the theme is not a speed issue. We get a lot of questions about what's the fastest theme. Who cares? It's not really affecting the speed at all, like in the real world, unless it's really, really bad. And in that case, you probably know it's bad. So e-commerce focused theme, but it's not really a focus of speed optimization. Renewing your domain name for as long as possible. So a .com is 10 years. So a .com domain is 10 years. So renew the domain for 10 years. The reason for that is to avoid it expiring. So most of the downtime we see from our customers and clients is because they forgot to renew domains. Even I have that as well. I had the other day, one of our obscure domains expired. My personal domain expired. And it was down for a day. And it was like, oh, totally forgot about this domain. So just renew the domains for as long as possible. So some are 5 years, some are 10 years. .com is 10 years. It's cheap insurance. Probably cheaper to renew it for 10 years anyway. Making sure you've got SPS from DKIM record set up. This is not a speed thing, but it is an email thing. And without these, your emails will probably go to spam. And then patching WooCommerce regularly. So patching things regularly ensures that the site is secure, but it also protects you from particular attacks. So we see a lot of WooCommerce sites get hacked, because one of the reasons is because users can register on the site. So a typical exploit, and the most common exploit we see on WooCommerce, is you can make an account as a customer and then do what's called a privilege escalation. So you can turn that customer account into administrator account and get control over the site. So I just wrote a note there: protect from privilege escalation attacks. So that's probably one of the main reasons to do that. There are other security holes, of course, but that's probably the most prominent way we see WooCommerce sites getting hacked. And that is also a case of people using obscure paid plugins that haven't been updated for years, and they have exploits that allow privilege escalation attacks. So make sure you patch regularly and try manually check paid plugins. Okay, I think that's it. That covers the basics. Check those boxes. Your site should be pretty fast. And like I said, you can use this report on our website to see the speed on an ongoing basis and see the history. It will also email you speed reports for free on whatever basis you choose. I think there's weekly and monthly options there. If you scroll down to the bottom, there you go, weekly and monthly. And this report also shows you, like I said, the history for the last 12 weeks. Sometimes there might be gaps. Maybe there's not enough traffic that week to, I don't know why that one has a gap, but the threshold for Core Web Vitals data is generally 50 to 100 visits a day. So if you drop below that threshold, then you won't have data. And you can see the data plotted out here on the graphs as well. If you do need help with your website, come to our website, WPSpeedFix.com, and claim a free website audit. Tell us what you need help with, and one of the team will come back to you and tell you how we can help. There's a whole other bunch of stuff on the website, free SEO audit, our mailing list as well, and a WordPress speed test tool that will give you insights and recommendations on how to make your site faster. I think that's everything. If you have any questions or something wasn't clear, post in the comments and we'll come back to you. Cheers.